Darlington. I hope everybody's okay, whether you're at school or whether you're at home. I hope everybody's getting on all right, managing to get their work done, and everybody's safe and well. This week I want to have a little think about trees. We know trees are really important for tackling climate change. They look after our environment. They also help keep our air clean and make sure that the air that we breathe is as clean as it can be. And so planting trees is often thought of as a good thing. But this week in the news, some scientists said that tree planting is really, really important, but also they have to be planted in the right places. So I want to find out a little bit more about this and think about trees this week. So the question we'll be thinking about in Assembly today is how important is it to plant more trees? Here's a lovely picture of a typical British landscape. Lots of our country is covered in farmland like this or grassland where we might see sheep or cattle grazing. But interspersed will be trees that go along the edge of fields, or sometimes they're together in groups in coppices or woods or even forests. So let's have a think about why trees are important. Rob was asked that question, and he explained that trees give us oxygen and store up carbon. So carbon is a bad thing to have in our air and can be poisonous to plants and human beings. Oxygen is what we need to be healthy and to help us breathe. So trees give out oxygen and they store up carbon. They would also do a good job of stabilising the soil and holding things together. And they also provide a home for lots of wildlife. They also give us materials which we can use for tools and shelter. So trees provide wood, but they don't just provide wood. There are all sorts of different things that come from the fruits of different trees. But the canopies of trees also act as a physical filter. They trap dust and stop pollutants from going into the air. They can provide shade for us when it's hot, and they also stop noise travelling, so they absorb sound. And research has shown that within a few minutes of being surrounded by trees and green spaces, people become calmer and feel more relaxed. And if we think about that for a moment, we know that's true, because often if we want to do something relaxing, we'll choose to go somewhere that has lots of trees. So sometimes when we go for a walk, we'll go somewhere that has lots of trees. So often we will use trees as part of our relaxation. Going to think about Stuart now, who says, can trees be planted anywhere? Because for years people have thought, well, tree planting is good, and they've planted trees wherever they can, really. And actually what scientists have been saying this week is that isn't always the right approach. Large-scale tree planting schemes can actually be harmful to the environment if they're not carried out properly. So when people plant the wrong trees in the wrong place, it can do more damage than good, and it can not be helpful to either the environment or to the people who might be trying to benefit from planting the trees. So often, we've had it at school before where we apply to a scheme and we get sent lots of trees and we just plant them. And actually, what they're saying is you should look at what type of trees should be planted in different places and plan the planting of trees rather than just doing it. Here's Emily. She's age 5, but she seems to know a lot about trees, because when she was asked what the best trees to plant, she said hazel, crabapple and goat willow are good trees to plant for small spaces. And the Tree Council say people should copy nature by planting trees that are already successful nearby. So if you see a tree or group of trees growing really well, they're a good tree for that area. And then Maxine wants us to know more about how can I learn more about trees and what trees to plant where. And she found lots of information on the Forestry Commission, the Woodland Trust or the Royal Horticultural Society. So you could look at their website or look out for printed materials that they produce. We're going to have a little watch of a video now about trees.
Around 30% of our planet is covered in trees. Trees are majestic, help biodiversity and can reduce climate change, but we're cutting them down at an alarming rate. Since the start of human civilization, it's estimated that we've cut down almost half the trees on Earth. So, What would happen if all of us, and that's all 7.7 billion of us, planted a tree? Well, there might be 7.7 billion of us, but it's estimated there are currently over 3 trillion trees on the planet. 7.7 billion more trees would be a valuable step forward, but we need to go further to make a really substantial difference to the environment. But we could. In fact, according to one estimate, if we planted 1.2 trillion trees, we'd cancel out a decade's worth of CO2 emissions by the time the forests mature. So that's more like 160 trees per person. Trees take carbon dioxide out of the air and release oxygen, making them a natural source of carbon capture. Planting 1.2 trillion more trees could capture up to 100 gigatons of CO2, on top of the 400 gigatons captured by all our existing trees. Trees planted near the equator can be especially beneficial as they grow much faster in the warm, wet and humid environment. Let's imagine that happened. In as little as 20 or 30 years, entire woodlands and forests would be established. And in 100 years, these trees would grow and mature, safeguarding habitats that otherwise get cut down. We'd also see a rise in biodiversity as trees get older and start to decompose, because they, along with dead trees, offer a habitat to all kinds of fungi and insects. On top of this, we could see a positive impact to our mental health. As studies have shown, trees can lower stress and make people happier. In Japan, they have a term for it: forest bathing. But despite how much trees offer us, we're getting rid of them at an alarming rate. Currently, it's estimated that 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions are the result of deforestation, because when we cut down trees, they emit carbon instead of absorbing it. And we're cutting down 15 billion trees a year. That's almost 500 trees a second, 29,000 a minute, 1.7 million an hour, and 41 million a day. So, although tree planting is a valuable part of tackling climate change, it won't be effective unless we reduce the number we cut down in the first place and make big changes to the way we live. So, if everyone on the planet planted a single tree, it would be a powerful symbolic act. And if we kept on planting them and stopped cutting them down, it could go a long way to protecting and safeguarding our world.
That video talked a little bit about the environmental impacts of making sure that we're planting trees, but also trying not to cut too many trees down. So thinking again about how trees help us. We know that trees provide us with wood, and that's a natural material that we use in lots of building or making things. They also give us some fruits, nuts and other food that comes from trees. We know that trees can be a bit of a natural playground. People will often go to places where there are lots of trees to play or to explore or for a walk. The shade from a tree can keep us cool. The picture's really interesting actually because it shows you what people always say is true about trees. However big the tree is above the ground, it will be at least as big underneath the ground. So its roots will be as big as its canopy. Trees produce oxygen, which we breathe, so we need trees to make sure that we've got clean air to breathe. Lots of insects, birds and animals live within trees or use them as a habitat. Trees can be beautiful to look at. Many people enjoy trees and can find being near them peaceful and relaxing. But the one thing that most people don't know or forget that trees do is they help protect our earth from things like flooding, fires, wind and soil erosion. So without trees, an area could be washed away when the rain is really heavy, but the roots of trees help hold things together and stop soil from slipping or sliding or being washed away. And so they actually protect our environment in lots of ways that we might not actually always realise. And that makes us go on to think about what a world would be like without trees. So we said that trees store carbon in their trunks and take carbon dioxide, which is bad for human beings, out of the atmosphere. Without trees, smaller plants might hold off the immediate effects of carbon in the atmosphere, but over time there would be more and more carbon in the atmosphere. And those large amounts of carbon would run into the oceans, and that would start to cause damage to our environment. It would increase global warming, make the air and the seas less healthy and less easy for us to live in. Animals and humans would begin to suffer because the world would get hotter and hotter and there would be less and less water, which is actually key. The one thing we need more than anything else to survive is water. Lots of people rely on trees for their livelihoods, so that might be for their job, but equally lots of people also rely on trees for their heating or for cooking. And a lot of medicines and food also come from trees. And if there were no trees, those medicines and foods would not exist. But if there were less trees, there would be fewer insects and plants, animals and fungi, as trees are their habitat. So without trees, there would be lots of species that became extinct or didn't exist anymore on the earth. And of course, without trees, the world would start to look very different. Obviously, there would be no forest to run through or explore. We couldn't build dens or climb branches. You couldn't use a tree to paint or draw it, or to inspire some writing or music or poetry. And you wouldn't be able to sit under the shade of trees or use them to help you relax or calm down. And possibly one of the biggest effects would be that the climate or our weather would be different. Without trees, areas would become much drier, and there might be more droughts, which is when there are long periods of time with no rain. When the rain did come, it's much more likely to result in flooding or problems because trees trap the water or keep the soil in place. And trees also have a cooling effect, so most places where trees stand would become a lot warmer. So there are lots of benefits to having trees, and these show that we need to have a responsible approach to looking after our world and making sure that we are planting new trees if we have to cut old ones down, but also that we're planting the right trees in the right places. When we think about things like looking after our environment and protecting our world, we have to think of one of our British values, which is the rule of law. Now, when you think about trees, you don't immediately think about the laws of our country or the rules. But actually, what this is reminding us of is when something's so important that it's about the future of our planet and making sure that things are allowed to live well and plan for the future so that our planet can be looked after, we actually have to have rules or laws around that. So when experts discover better ways of looking after our world, such as planting the right types of trees in the right places, the government has to consider changing the laws so that the planting trees is done correctly, and we make sure that it's everyone's responsibility to do things right and to look after our planet. So it might not be the first of our British values that we think about when we're thinking about trees, but actually it is one of those things where it's so important that we get it right, that we have to have rules or laws for everyone to follow, and we all have to accept that it's our responsibility to look after our world. And this also relates to the United Nations rights of a child. One of those rights is about making sure that everybody can survive and develop well. And when experts discover the ways of looking after our world, governments must do all they can to make sure the laws give children the best chances of a good life. And one of the reasons that we have those laws is to make sure that our planet is looked after for the long-term future, not just for the next few years. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed finding out about trees and making sure that we plant the right trees in the right places. Of course, it's important to replace trees that we use with new ones, because that looks after our planet. But we need to do more than that. We need to make sure that they're the right trees that are going to grow well there and be in the right place. So we need to think about where we're planting trees and how we plant them, not just think about planting new ones as much as we can. I've set you a little activity if you'd like to have a go at it. I'd love to see your efforts if you do. It's just below. Scroll down underneath this video and you can follow a link. It's a YouTube tutorial on how to draw a tree. They use a pencil or a pen to do the drawing, and they also use a pastel to colour it in. You might have a pastel at home or you might not. If you haven't, don't worry. You could use a crayon or a felt tip or something similar. Used a couple of different colours though to get the same shading effect that they do. I think they could look really, really good. If you have a go at one, send us a picture to homelearning@wintonprimary.uk and we'll put the best ones up on our website one Friday afternoon. Okay? Take care everybody, stay safe, and hopefully see you all soon. Bye.